Welcome back to the Get Into the Bag podcast. I go by Polo Sho. I'm your host. I'm a rapper slash entrepreneur based here in YYC. And my guest here today is
none other than yours truly, Rudolf III, aka Triangular, aka Joe King. I am a rapper, singer, comedian, poet, and all-around good guy. I've also been a chef, or I'm pursuing being a chef, and a martial artist, black belt in Hapkido. So without further ado, I want to thank Polo for putting me on his podcast and all the lovely viewers that are hopefully going to view this. And yeah, I'd like to read some of your comments, and hopefully you enjoy the podcast that's about to go down.
Yeah. And so just on that note, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a thoughtful comment if you're fucking with the podcast. And just like that, we're going to get right into it. Thank you, Rudolf, for making it here today.
No problem.
So for those of you who don't know, we're recording this podcast at Solid Studios. Rudolf has come and we've gotten a couple tracks done, completed here at Solid Studios. I'm actually working on his album right now. Just about to finish mastering that. So I guess, right now I want to just... This is gonna feel more like an interview, but it will still be a conversation. How did it all start, man? Like, how did you get into hip hop?
Well, at the time, everyone was obsessed because I'm 34 years old, and back in the 90s, before samples were properly licensed and cleared, people like Vanilla Ice took the famous bass line from a Queen song, and Rick James' Super Freak was sampled in the hit song Can't Touch This by MC Hammer. And I basically got into it because at the time I fell in love with music like any kid does. I pulled out the pots and pans, and that was my first drum kit. And I got into hip hop because it was a lot more easier for me to achieve that goal, because as a kid, when you're struggling, you're bullied, and they don't allow you to take performing arts to the full extent, then rapping was a lot easier way, because I had started off with writing stories, because people knew I had learning disabilities with struggling with reading and writing, but I had a great creativity. And so they wanted to nurture that. So they were like narrating, I would like dictate my stuff to like a writer, and then they type it for me until my skills got better. And then I got into poetry because I'm like, well, I can express my thoughts and feelings and my emotions a lot more deeper and touch people's heart and mind, as opposed to getting caught up in all the bullying and all the surface level BS. And then after that, people were egging me on because they heard, I like P. Diddy and I like, Will Smith and, the people of the time. And then I kind of just, okay, do this little freestyle, kind of like mocking me. Now, after a while, I'm like, okay, I just knew how to do like P. Diddy's song, but that wasn't me at all.
Right.
So then after a while, I just thought, well, I can't afford a turntable like the guys do at the church or the guys at DJs trying to inspire, but I can go to the dollar store and get a pen and a pad and start writing. Yeah. And as I saw spoken word, which started to be around the beatnik scene at the time, as an avenue for people to do that, I'm like, wait a second, that's not too dissimilar from the rapping. Once you put the poetry, especially spoken word, onto the beats, because at the time there was more conscious rap going. So it was like India Reid and Lauryn Hill, and they were doing more of a spoken word style, their raps, especially her Unplugged album with the guitar. And I was like, okay, so if I kind of do that and do the philosophical rhymes like Harris One and Queen Latifah, then maybe I could do that. And that's kind of where it all started, my love. And then I started, doing hip hop for so long. I was like, okay, people keep making fun of me and thinking I'm just a one-trick pony. So I found, okay, there's Lenny Kravitz. And I was like happy when he made that song with P. Diddy, because I'm like, okay, now and he's with Jay-Z, and I understand those things, and now I can go into his world. And then Lenny Kravitz, then you learn Prince, and you learn Stevie Wonder, and you're Bruce Springsteen. You're like, wow, this is music. So, and then it was a way for me to find my voice. In a long-winded way, that's kind of the answer of it.
No, that makes sense. How old were you?
Oh, I was about 13, and I remember I did the most vulgarest rap I could do at the time, because I didn't know how to read and write, and I just came with a super vulgar rap because I was listening to Eminem and listening to Snoop Dogg and all these guys, and I was more into their beats than their lyrics. And I was always a lyric guy. I was always looking for the guy who had the cool voice like Big Daddy Kane. Or I was looking for that guy with the dopest rhymes like KRS-One. I'm like, who's gonna say something that's not about misogyny or not about swearing, you know? It's talking about Roger Clemens. Oh, that's different. No one really talks about a baseball player. And then I started off and I did such a vulgar rap. And then I was up looking for my homework in grade 8 class. I think it was social studies. And I never forget it. Her name was Mrs. Kuzma. And she was about middle-aged. And she told me to double-check again for my homework. Because it's imperative that I had my homework. So I ended up going back to my locker a second time. And she checked in my backpack. And she found the vulgar rap. The rhyme that I'd written. And if you want, I could say it, but anyway, suffice to say, she blackmailed me. She put me to the principal, and they said, well, if you don't confess to your parents that you wrote this vulgar rap, we're going to out you, and we're going to do a lot more bad, you know, punishing you.
So I don't want you to rap it on here, and I also don't want you to, like, say, like, disrespectful stuff as well. So can you just tell me, like, the kind of words, like, you can say the B word or whatever, like, the kinds of things that were in there that this teacher would have seen and deemed, like, inappropriate?
Well, the line that sticks out to me is, I said the N-word in there because that's what I heard. But it said, ends come suck my you-know-what in the early light to really see what it's like to suck a white man's dick. So that's kind of what I was saying there. And I'm completely opposite. I'm positivity and I don't swear in my music. But at the time, I kind of just thought that, you know, people were delving with the racial issues of the time. And I kind of thought, you know, and they were doing a lot of the sexy R&B stuff. So I was trying to make like a sexy rhyme because I was, you know, young, going through puberty, was horny a lot. So I was like, okay, I'll do a little sexy rhyme. And everyone's using the N-word. And I kind of thought it was like, brother, I got to understand the racial implications of it.
Right.
And then she thought it was vulgar. And I'm like, well, you know, instead of like trying to embarrass me and humiliate me, why don't you, not my ignorance, but why don't you like educate me? Like, you know, let's like come to like, don't tell me that the N-word is bad. Tell me why it's bad.
Right.
You know, educate me. And she didn't do that. She went to the principal and they blackmailed me, they threatened me if I didn't tell it to my parents, like bring home the letter and show them what I did. And what they did in response, they took all my rap records and devastated.
Your parents?
Yeah, all my rap records from like Mace, Harlem World, to like Will Smith. They didn't even care. They just thought it was rap and they saw the gangster rap stereotype. And like, okay, he's being influenced in a negative way.
Right.
And so we're just going to take all his rap records and we're going to junk all his stuff. And at the time when I was like literally like buying like 10 CDs to get the free bonus one at the H&M card so I could be it like that. I was like buying backs, but I was buying Spice because I love music. And I remember at the time, I was so crazy with my love of music. Like I was just studying and trying to get good grades so I could be, like I was getting incentivized. Like if I got good grades, I got $100. Then I can go buy the Sean John shirt, or I can go buy the Air Force, or not, Jordan 1. Because that was $100 at the time. So then I couldn't wait because I'm like, oh, this LL Cool J song Phenomenon has a dope beat. And I can't wait to go, you know, off, like finish school and listen to this song. Or before I knew P. Diddy's song, I'll Be Missing You, was like a Sting song or the sample from, you know, his song.
Right.
Then I was like, this is such an amazing song. I love the meaning behind it. And he's saying these kind things about his friend Biggie who passed away. And you know, Faith Evans and 112 were singing on there, so it wasn't just straight rapping. I go, so this is so heartfelt. I couldn't wait to get home and write the rap, and then I'd write something cool, and then I'd be like, oh, wicked, I got to show it to my friend, and my friend was like, getting tired, not another rap again. You know, that's how it was for me. And when I got my, like, you know, the show and tell portion of school, I remember they just called me out of the blue, and I was so excited, I couldn't even do my homework that day. And my parents like, aren't you supposed to be studying? I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be studying every day. Like, you know, that's how it was. I went home and I practiced and I really got my rhyme right. And then I went on there and I messed up a few lines. I'm like, this is awesome. Finally, they see me liking hip hop and I can finally be another white guy rapping. So it's not just Vanilla Ice and Beastie Boys or maybe Third Base. Because Eminem wasn't around at the time, right? It was all 3 big acts at the time. And then it was just like from there, my love just kind of grew, you know. And then I just saw there's like Carlos Santana, and he's doing Black Magic Woman, he's playing crazy on the guitar, and it was like, you know, those elements just kind of I fell in love with. And then it's like, okay. I remember a funny story when I went to go get the Mariah Carey album. She did the Rainbow. And this was before the LGBT thing was rainbow. I just loved color because graffiti was big and colorful. Power Rangers were colorful. Everything was about color. And I saw it. I'm like, oh, she looks so great. She's toned. She's got her nice legs showing out. So I went and bought the thing. But I was a kid. I didn't know GST because at the time it was 7. So my multiples of 7 was whack, but my 5s were okay. So I went to the counter, and there was a guy there who saw I was a bit embarrassed because I just had enough for the CD, but I didn't calculate the tax.
Yeah.
So what he did, because he thought I was a bit embarrassed because, you know, I was buying Mariah Carey CD, and he thought, okay, he's probably buying because she looks hot, or is he really into that sort of stuff? So he looked on the back, and there was a barcode on the CD, and he typed that in so I could get the proper price for it.
Oh, that's pretty nice.
Yeah, for the CD. So, I mean, there's tons of stories I can tell about, like, cool fan moments I've had with music and my love of it, but that's really where it started. It was like I found my voice in hip hop. You know, it was like a way for me to be funky and to be romantic, and me to be philosophical, and be like, you know, people are bullying me and people were criticizing me, and then I could rap to them. And there was like even a kid I remember, we used to bully him all the time, and I had scraps with him. And then it got to the point where he just despised me. Like, he was calling me a legit wigger, and he was like saying, okay, you're being a poser, but I'll pay you double what your first demo is worth because I just love your track. So I was like, that's a weird dichotomy. How can he hate my guts in the physical, but in the music realm, he loves my ability to create music and my creativity. So then I was like, it sparked him. It's like, I can get out of this situation where my karate or my martial arts was being passive aggressive, but still on the violent side, and I could pick up the mic instead of pick up a weapon or use my fists. I can use my rhymes, you know, with my fists in the air, you know, as a sign of pride, as opposed to striking you in the face with it. So it really helped me to be mature, because at the time, you know, maturity was a hard thing to come by, because you're young, you know, people are selling dope on the street, making $20 like that. And then you're just sitting at home thinking, when is it going to be my turn to be validated? When is it going to be my turn to have friends and a girlfriend and all that? So music gave me that avenue, right? Because it was like, now I can wear these nice, funky clothes. And I can go up there and do a song about recycling, and people are going to love it because it's catchy and it has a dope meaning behind it. And there was like a lot of those things that, you know, I'm just so proud of, because it caused me a lot of hardship, but it also caused me a lot of pride. Because now I can not just have a hit record, I can have a hit record with a message. And I can go beyond that and start a conversation about something that impacts everyone. Race, creed, color, shape, you know, everyone's going through global warming. So there you go. There's a little backstory on that.
No, that makes sense, man. And so you discovered hip hop, you know, you found your voice in it. So I feel like today you are definitely more developed. You know what I mean? I want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like you're fully developed. Everyone's still growing, but you're a pretty developed artist. Yeah. Is what I'm trying to say. And everything from, you know, how you want your albums to sound, you want themes, you know, how you want yourself to flow, like, you know, like we had a conversation once about, you know, you're not really about throwing a bunch of syllables in there. Yeah. You really want the verse to be smooth, though. Yeah. Even, you know, what you choose to wear when you perform, right? Yeah. So I guess, how did you go from, all right, I've discovered hip hop, I know this is for me, to where you are now? Because it looks like, you know, there were a lot of avenues to be, you know, to be like, all right, to be at this point where you are, to be like, all these different things make up the artistry that is me. You know what I mean?
I'll tell you a funny story, and this is no exaggeration. We used to have these kind of cream colored with the blue writing, those kind of books or whatever you want to call them, that had the lined paper in them. And this was in like kindergarten, grade 1. We always had to finish our day with writing a page to improve our reading and writing. And I swear to you, I couldn't write one row when I started the class. And everyone had their hands in the pot. And by the end, I was heading down a negative path of wickedness. You know, I was being like almost like a juvenile delinquent where I was getting in trouble. And I came back from the principal's office. Like I literally spent half the time there. And it wasn't because I was bad, because half of that principal time was helping me to write my stories, to develop my writing. But which was a blessing too, because people thought, oh, he can't be that bad. You know, I was just getting a bad rap here. And when I finished that school year, I came back from the principal's office, and the teacher, Mrs. White, I will never forget it. She spent countless hours at night helping me to read and write because she knew I can't live if I'm illiterate. Especially in a public school, it's an embarrassment that a teacher's letting their kids slip like this. And the whole disability thing was very stigmatized at the time. So they couldn't help me the proper way. They could help me as just basically being there and coaching me. And I came back from the principal's office, and she was so proud. She showed the whole class that this dude couldn't write one line. And now he wrote a whole page. And now I'm writing stuff like The Zen of My Journey, and I'm writing the 3 R's about recycling, and all these stuff that people are like, wait a second. I remember going to this producer's house. He's kind of a rapper too, but Alake. And I remember going there, and I got this verse in one of my songs talking about an ion, a molecule. And he's like, how'd you come up with this? Like, how does he find his Zen? And I'm like, well, haven't you learned, basic chemistry? You got your covalent bonds, and he finds it when he gains neutrality. And it all made sense when you say it. It was like the journey really started from then to now is really falling in love with the storytelling and the message behind it, and being like, I'm proud, much more proud of saying something really interesting and profound. Because everyone's like, oh, that guy's dropping science. But that was a slang term for just something that was really dope. But it was like, it was an actual science. I was like, why don't I be the MC that's even doper than that? Even doper than Rakim and Wu-Tang and stuff. We're just saying like cool lines. Being like, oh, I actually drop stuff that you can physically go into a book, or you can actually fact check, and being like, wow, that's actually takes some brains.
Yeah, and I feel like that's at the heart of MCing, you know what I mean? Like, definitely, like we said, like, an MC is not just... I feel like a rapper is different from an MC.
Yeah.
A rapper is the, he can rhyme words, There's some kid at some high school who freestyles on lunch break, and he's a rapper, you know what I mean? But I feel like an MC is the person who, the whole crowd is in commotion or whatever, and the guy can pick up the mic and... command the room.
That's right.
You know what I mean? An MC doesn't even have to be a lyricist. It doesn't even have to be a rapper, right? Like an MC, like if, like a game show host, that's really killing it at his job, right? He always has the right jokes, always knows how to emote with the audience. That's an MC, right? And so as it relates to music, or as it relates to rap music, I believe like that's the core of it. Like, being able to, through your music, say something so profound, that you can grab the audience like that,
Well, sorry to interrupt you, but I'll tell you a quick story that was really interesting to me when I was writing. And there's 2 points. Every time I used to write, I never believed in voodoo or witchcraft, but there was a weird entity, and I went to church and I went to counselors to try to understand it. And when I used to write really intensely, like focus, like be in the Zen moment, I remember I'd talk about, let's say, Jaguar, and I probably wouldn't use it. It'd just be like something, because I'm into nature, and then I was talking about, cars or something, and Jaguar I thought would merge the 2 things together. And then I'd literally go outside, and I'd cross the street, and a Jaguar car would just pass me. I talk about the heat of passion on one song, and then I would say lines like 50 Shades of Amber Aestheticness. And it'd be a dope line, and then I'd watch The Flash, which had nothing to do with the superhero character who runs really fast, and then the theme of their episode was to deal with fire. I was like, what's that? So this leads into my second story. I had this buddy, his name was Brendan, and he came from Vancouver and was living with his family, and we met up at English class because we both struggled getting our English marks so we can go to our respected professions and start learning that. And he was freestyling too, but he wasn't as good as me. I was wasting money on clothes and stuff, but I never did the booze. I never got drunk. I never spent my, max on my card on a dope dealer or my tab. But he was, and he'd just call me at like 2 a.m, on the cell phone and being like, guess what I did? I didn't realize I just blew $160 on booze. And he was getting DUIs, and he tried to, laugh it off. And he saw me, and he's like, who's this goody two-shoes wearing clothes like this and not really engaging? And I'm like, I'm good. Women still like me. They're not my girlfriends, but I still rock the crowd. Everyone knows me because I'm a character, and so, I get laughs. So I have my moments. I don't need to have alcohol or weed, to facilitate that. And kind of, symbolic part of the thing. And then through the years, he kind of started to get mature, because he's like, I kind of like showed him an example to live a more positive life. So he went to be a physiotherapist, a personal trainer first, and that didn't work out, because he was just basically, when people finish their New Year's resolutions, they'd come in and then they'd fizzle out, and then they'd be like unpaid, or they'd be like paid memberships that people really didn't follow through on, and he'd just sit there and waste his time. And he's like, well, why don't I do something more positive with my life? Like the Rudy guy is doing. We made fun of him, but he's like always in the lab, writing a dope rap. He's exercising. He's on the bicycle, some part of the city, getting his workout on. And so he's seen that, and he's like, okay, so how can I transfer this into a more positive part of life? I can't be just smoking dope and drinking Red Bulls. So then he went back and he became a physiotherapist. Then he went back to Vancouver, because he couldn't find work here. Then he got a job for $36 an hour, being in a real hospital. Then he got a wife, because he was just sleeping around, with cougars and a bunch of other people. And then now he has a kid. And I tell him this story, and he's so happy. I don't always tell it like, I say more eloquently when I talk. I'm just kind of rambling on. But the gist of it was like, if I can do such profound things, like I'd literally be rapping for like years. And the one song that I do that's on the project you're mixing, it's My Cruel Addiction. And I'm singing on that, or my version of what singing is. And I remember going there, and people I knew for years wouldn't even touch the mic next to me, because that's how they were with their egos. And then they'd be chanting this song. I'm like, I played it for you 2-3 times at Cafe and now you guys are legit chanting the chorus, singing along. It's like it's such moments. Like, I'm like, even the buddy, no disrespect to him, but I don't know his rap career, but he's probably not getting that crowd reaction. So I'm like, if I can get that, who knows what I could do if I'm in there. I'm just another I love you babe. I'm just another, I've got 50 G's in the bank and I'm better than you. It's like, no, now there's something positive here that we can work with. And then you can go to me and be like, you're not just a dope MC, but you inspire me. I had the one woman, just to keep it short, she was part of the jazz DJ female kind of crew at Broken City. Okay. So it was like a group of like 4 or 5 female DJs that all came together like a collective, and they do Friday nights, every Friday nights for like a year. And she saw me wearing the clothes that I wear, the attitude that I have, the kind of lyricism, and you're a dope MC and you don't give a crap. You wear that clothes with conviction. And then she got inspired and started doing clown makeup. Did it add to her DJing? Not at all. Did it make her character and her confidence better? 100%. I'm like, so I was the guy they were teasing and calling a loser and calling the F word like gay and all those other, discriminatory terms, and now I inspired her to be more real. So, that's even with this project. That's why I'm so adamant and grateful for working with you, because I feel once people see that and hear that and know who I am, it's just going to be like those other people. Hopefully it's going to reverberate. Now I'm going to inspire 3-4 more people and change their lives to be more positive. Because my friend could have been smoking dope, and now he's helping lives through physiotherapy and saving lives in a way. So, I'm so proud of that, So if anyone can take anything away from this podcast, it's really find your voice and believe in yourself, because who knows what greatness, the potential you have within you.
That's a really good example, with, inspiring that DJ to, put on clown makeup and just added a different layer to her act, right? Like you said, it gave her character. So in that vein, to ask you, I've never seen you perform.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get a show on the books here pretty soon.
Yeah.
But you had said to me that you do like to wear a dress.
That's correct.
When you perform. So I was hoping you could tell me more about that. Like, what is your motivation to doing that?
Yeah.
I kind of understand, like you're saying it is, but yeah, explain more about that.
Well, to make it short, and then I'll elaborate further.
Okay.
I've got a sexual and creative appetite for it. So what that means is I'm obviously aroused by it. It is like a fetish, you could say. But on the creative sense, it was like, I listened to an interview, and I listened to this years after I decided to do this, but RuPaul was talking with Oprah Winfrey, and he said how unintentionally it became the new punk. It became cross-dressing, and the whole drag culture became the new kind of rebellion at the time, because it was one of once punk is still taboo, don't get me wrong, but the elements they were doing became more socially acceptable, like wearing tattoos and getting your ears pierced wasn't as taboo on a watered-down version.
Okay.
But still wearing women's clothing, especially in the Bible, like the Old Testament, which like the Jewish people follow, the law versus gospel, and Deuteronomy 2:5 said, they frown upon it. They condemn it, they don't condone it. And for me, I always thought, whether you believe in spiritually, whether God's real or not, I'm like, so why would he create me to be so fabulous if I didn't have merit? And so I'm like, there's a rhyme and there's a reason to it. Not just because rappers have a rhyme and a reason, like no pun intended, but it was like, it allowed me to do such magical things I could never do being someone like Polo or Rubik's, or doing that stereotypical hip-hop thing, or switching it up and being like Usher, putting on a dress shirt and being that more suave kind of debonair guy. It was more to do with like my creativity. Like if I'm an artist, I want to show you not just sonic art, but visual art. So I want to be like a walking piece of art, And then when I was wearing the suits, I have like the flyest suits you can imagine. I had like, the blue color that you get on Blue Raspberry on the Slurpee.
Yeah.
Like I had the linen blazer in that color. And I'd be rocking the red velvet before Steve Harvey even knew what red velvet was. Like I was just like pimping out. Yeah. And I get them at like, places where they were selling zoot suits with the feathers in the cap. And I was looking like that, And I remember going there and, you'd have to remember how to tie your tie, and you had to get a tie clip and 3 layers, and it's just like sweating crazy, and it'd be constricting. And so I looked in the mirror one day and said, my parents are never going to accept this, and I still have to kind of hide from them. But I looked in the mirror and I felt I was living a lie. And not just from like a sexual standpoint, but I'm like, look how wicked this is going to be, because nobody's doing it. And when they do the drag, it's very caricaturish. It's almost like a comedy, it's like Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks, or it's Mrs. Doubtfire, Robin Williams, and so it's a very comedical fashion, right? And very comical. And I thought, no, I can bring high fashion, I can bring uniqueness and creativity, and then it worked for me because half the people hated me and half the people loved me, but they paid attention.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Every hip hop head. There was no hip-hop head in the dang room, or non-hip-hop, who wasn't paying attention. As soon as they touched the mic, I spent all this time doing these philosophical lyrics, and I got this dope beat, and I got this guitar solo, and that's, not an easy feat for someone to do. Not everyone's whipping out guitar solos. I spent the time and money and effort, and to get this sound, I don't want to waste it to look like a background guy, or look like a roadie or a background. Like, I want to be front and center. Like Elton John or something. So I put on the yellow dress, and I go into the dingiest bar. And I'm like, well, I look like I just got picked from the lemon tree. So I hope I'm not too sour, because I don't want to start off my performance on a sour note. And then you start with that icebreaker, and you hit them with the dope lyrics and the cool melodies. And then you're like, now you got the hook, now you got them in. You don't have to be annoying like Flavor Flav and scream at them and get a giant clock, and stuff like that. So that was kind of it. And then I had great style. And so I looked better than people's girlfriends and wives. And then, you know, the bombs and the rednecks were pissed off, but then people are like, wow, you look better than my girlfriend. Maybe you can give my girlfriend some tips. You know, and they were just like, and in normal context, that would be rude. That'd be insulting. And then the woman was like, yeah, I love your shoes. And then they would flirt with me. And then, oh, you got great legs. That's bike riding all the time. And so then it allowed me to get, you know, more favor with the women. And then I'd be like literally at like 10 to 10. And all these hip-hop guys promoters would be dissing me. Even the main guy, Benny, wouldn't even give me, like, sometimes a handshake. He wouldn't acknowledge me. But then there'd be, like, a woman. White, black, didn't matter. I'd be making out with her in the middle of the dance floor, wearing a dress. So I'm like, and I tried doing, you know, the jeans and T-shirt stuff. But I'm like, well, I'm just going to leave that for my personal life. You know, the jeans and T-shirt. I'm just going to go to the grocery store. I don't need to be on it. And when I'm on stage, turn up all the lights and just go for it. Because I want to keep it real. And there's like a funny way I tell it to people. I'm like, I keep it real with an A. Because it's A-OK. Not with a double E. And the reason I say that, I keep it real with an A because it's A-OK. Because people who spell real with a double E, it's real like, you know, when you got the film reels? Because they're living a lie. They're living in a fairy tale. Yeah. And I'm keeping it real with an A because I'm trying to be authentic with my fan and my listener and being like, okay, I know it's taboo. And they're not just clothing to me. There's like a whole thing about it. But there's also like so much I can do with this. I can break down barriers. I can have real conversations with people. I can have people now kind of break that stigma of, you know, men wearing women's clothing. I mean, I can be okay with this now because this is a dope guy. He's awesome. And then, you know, break the stigma that it's all this big extreme caricatureness and flamboyant homosexuals and everything. It could be a straight guy who just, you know, wants to be creative and wants to be expressive, and he can be cool too. You know, and if I'm hip-hop, cool. If I'm not hip-hop, so be it. But I'm more like, not just happy, but content with knowing that my fan can get the truer version of me, as opposed to what, you know, the media wants to write the narrative, or the record company, if I ever get there, and say, oh, you need to be, you know, ball cap, and you need to be Timberland boots, or you need to be J's, because that's what hip-hop is. And I'm like, no, what is music, right? You have like Paul McCartney in a jeans and T-shirt. It works for him.
Right.
But Elton John and Kiss are on the other side, and it works for them, and it feels natural. So I'm like, you know, we were talking off camera too about the importance of what makes a true artist, and there's so many elements to what makes that, you know, and that's what I like, because now when you see Rubik's and you see Polo, you don't just see Polo 1 and Polo 2 and Polo 3, you see Rudolf the Third, and you see Polo, and now you can totally tell the difference between us. And when you listen to us, you don't get same tracks, and then, you know, there's versatility there, and there's something to be had with the experience, because now you're like, okay, if that guy can put on a yellow dress and make a joke about it and be free, then we just need to reassess our lives for a second. We need to step back and take a breath and look at what we're really considering as right and wrong, and not be just what the Bible says or what the society says, and being like, okay, but what do we think in our own minds and hearts? And it's love, you know?
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, that's the best way I can say it. That's kind of what I do it, because I feel it's the most realist representation. I mean, and it's unique.
And so you want to keep this as a consistent theme throughout your career?
Yes, as long as I can kind of not get scrutinized to the point where it's affecting me physically or mentally. But, you know, and to my credit, you know, I started it when I was in my 20s. I mean, you know, as a kid, I was used to sneak around, you know, have fun with myself, kind of put it on and do the sexual component. But when I did it in public, you know, I do like different things. Like I go into the bathroom, change and go to class and see if people would wig out. And then when people started to have their opinions, as the world started to progress and LGBT issues started to not be such a big thing, a stigma, the fourth or fifth wall started to come down, like the veil. then people saw behind the scenes that a lot of those people were straight heterosexual males that were putting on like a show, and they got their enjoyment from the extravagance and the fabulousness of it. And it was less to do with being a pervert and less to do with being like a flamboyant, character. And, and it's just like, it boils down to people's personal preference. We can go back and say, okay, guys wear kilts, and we can argue if that's a skirt or not a skirt. And we can say the loincloth was kind of like a skirt because there wasn't really stitching between the legs, and we can get into it like that. But what's interesting to me, like, not to go too far into the topic, but like even up to the 70s, right? Like you see like John Travolta in one of his movies, Saturday Night Fever, I think it was, were up to like the 70s. Like they were still wearing like high-heeled boots, like those bell bottoms. And when I was born in 87, I was only like, 15, 20 years removed from that. So in like the scale of human history and fashion, like you're basically there. So if it was like 100 years later, then you can make an argument, okay, that was weird, or that was, blah, blah, blah. But to be so close, it kind of helps straighten my narrative. Like, it's just clothes. It really doesn't matter like that. Mm-hmm. And now it's become so taboo that it's like, people are very polarizing about it. And I'm just like, even people who are heterosexual guys, like I have guitar buddies, they're whipping out, flamenco guitar and Alicia Keys covers and stuff. And they be going up to women and saying, look at him, this is how you're supposed to dress. And propping me up as an example and a role model to follow. It's all just because I was trying to be real. I spent all this time trying to be phony and trying to, do the hip-hop thing and put the baseball cap to the side and, pull up my pants, one of them, so I could be more hip-hop and just have one droop and one not droop, or, do the half shirt thing where you're like cold and hot at the same time. Like going through male version of menopause or whatever the joke was at the time. And just be like, gotta be real. Because I'm way more prouder in not having people buy my CD to the fullest extent or missing out shows than to get those shows and be fake.
Right. I feel you. Yeah. I feel you, man. As far as your truth, it's just it's an interesting, it's interesting that you had the the confidence and the bravery to embrace it as your truth, right? Like you said, it looked like it did take some a while before you were able to be like, this is my truth. And this is every time I'm on stage, this is going to be me. Yeah. That's really cool, man. One thing I was going to ask you about was your martial arts history. So I'm definitely very interested in martial arts. From when I was very young, my parents put me in Taekwondo. I think I made it to the second belt in that. I did Kung Fu a bit in college. I only did a couple months of it. And right now, I'm currently training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay. I've been doing that for the last year.
Respect.
So yeah, man, I'm very interested in martial arts, and I think we spoke about it briefly off camera once. You told me you're training Hapkido.
Yeah. So basically, I'll give you the quick version of it. Okay. At the time, the two biggest things in the action world were Power Rangers and Jackie Chan. Yep. And Bruce Lee, obviously, but that was a generation before. Right. So when Power Rangers hit, it was an adaptation from the Japanese Sentai, which was their version of Power Rangers, which they had bought it off before we knew that, North America liked to buy shows and readapt them to a North American market. Yep. And all we saw was good values, like good morals, like you can fight and be more of ethics and morals as opposed to just fighting to beat up someone. And it was, again, the colors, right? Everyone had their own character. Right. And it was even, people who got really crazy about it were saying, well, they just made the red guy Native American and they made the yellow person Chinese. Actually, the first ever Yellow Ranger was black. But she got cut out of the pilot because it didn't work, and then they put one, and then, why is a black guy black? Is that a racist dig, And it was like, no, because he was the flyest guy at the time, and he mixed in hip-hop dancing with his style of karate. And so it was kind of, actually, before there was the red guy who was a Native American, he was a Caucasian white guy, so they was trying to do that. But we loved, it was like the kids at the time, there was two loves. there was Star Trek, and there was Power Rangers.
Yep.
And so we always used to play fight all the time around the parking lot. And when you got teased, you were always getting the yellow ranger or the pink ranger. You never got the red or the green or the blue. And at the time, on Power Rangers, they had only footage for 10 episodes, original Green Ranger, and people loved his badass character so much and felt sorry when he lost his powers that they had to remake a whole new Ranger for him. And we didn't know, we just thought he was a 7th Ranger.
Right.
So we were like trying to be fly with the cast, trying to swear. We're like, so we're not going to take the pink and yellow. We're beating our chest. Well, because there was 2 of us. So we'll just be combined the White Ranger.
Yeah.
To kind of trick them. And so when I was young, there was a studio around my neighborhood because I was at Silver Springs at the time.
Okay.
And if you look at it, there's like a women specific like a club. Like it's like a gym, but it's more just for women. Because some women feel more comfortable not having a man in the presence of training. And what happened was we went there because we love Jackie Chan. And we're like, okay, a guy who can do the karate but be paused, be a nice guy. And then later on we saw Karate Kid. And we're like, okay, Mr. Miyagi and Daniel Russo, that was the big thing for us back. Everybody knew Karate Kid. And so my love of martial arts came from that desire. I'm like, oh, I want to be like a Power Ranger. I want to be my own color and have my own voice. Same with the music. And then I got into it. And then after a while, it became more of a functional survival thing because I was short. Like, you know, I'm only 5'5.5" without heels. And I was like 5'4". And even though I was the biggest kid in the school at the time because people didn't have a growth spurt until later, you know, there were people, because of the whole gangster rap thing, people took the lifestyle as well because they thought, well, we want to keep it real. So they were trying to be gangsters when they were living in you know, the suburbs, and they had nice families and stuff like that with leather couches and Mercedes Benzes and whatnot. And we're thinking, well, what the heck are you doing? So I didn't have friends. So I'm like, well, I probably, if my teachers would have allowed me to do performing arts, I would have loved to do that more so. Because it would have helped my music right now to learn the techniques and the skill and less self-taught and more technical side. I was like, well, I love the discipline of Kung Fu, and Wu-Tang was getting into the whole thing. I didn't like Wu-Tang, but I was like, look, they're liking it too. So it's becoming more socially acceptable. And again, I thought that I could be one of those nice guys who gets into martial arts and kind of changes the narrative. And it's not this aggressive sport that breaks bones and boards. You could be passive aggressive, and you could be like the leaf on the branch and kind of go with the flow, or the stream in the river, and just kind of like not go hard into the rock and break it, but just over time smooth it out and smooth out the rough edges and the sharp corners and make everything a bit more, you know, like your childhood, where it was like, you know, training wheels and padding and stuff, and kind of make it less abrasive. So when we talk, you know, we're not just being aggressive all the time. I can learn how to channel my frustration and my fear. And, you know, the big thing was like the self-defense. I thought, you know, okay, rap is getting me somewhere, but it's not making me money. But I need to worry about the dope dealers on the corner who's got the crowbars if they ever want to jump me, because some people did. It's much better to throw, you know, a sidekick into their gut and run away, or to block a punch, than it is to like try to rap battle them.
Right.
So I'm just trying to put those two things together. But yeah, and then I did it for 15, 20 years. Because what ended up happening is I really want to stick with it. You know, I never felt like I was fully confident with my style, to the point where I felt confident enough to consider myself, oh, I'm ready to be a green belt or purple belt. And then when I got to black belt, I thought it was like this holy grail. I'm like, only Chuck Norris and only Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme and Bruce Lee get there. You know, it's not a regular Joe who's like struggling in school and likes wearing dresses in his private time. He's getting, you know, black belt. And I felt proud because now I can, you know, be a good role model to people. Because I don't drink, or like I drink a bit, but I don't get drunk. I'm on the corner, you know, smoking a joint. So I'm kind of, you know, and then later on, it became when the Karate Kid, had its resurgence with Netflix and Cobra Kai thing. I'm like, a lot of those things they're teaching and a lot of those values that they're instilling in their students was instilled in me. And it just came full circle. It's like, great, finally, martial arts is not, like the horrors of UFC and Conor McGregor and his crazy shenanigans. And it wasn't like Mike Tyson getting whacked out on drugs and biting Evander Holyfield's ear off. Like, now there was Mr. Miyagi and there was Jackie Chan and there was like a softer side of it. So that's why I kind of fell into it. And Hapkido was just a style that was taught at my gym that I was at, like my training facility. And it was just like, it was kind of karate, but our style was just mixed martial arts. Like, we learned everything from judo throws to grappling, wrestling, kickboxing, boxing, a bit of Tai Chi so we can like transfer energy and stuff. And then obviously the discipline, like, and we learned like a bit of like what the anatomy was, and a bit of like Korean, like Hana Dul, Set, Net, Toss, Yos, Eagle, Yodel, Up, Yaw. And then we'd run and try to count and stuff like that.
So let me ask you this. Did you ever do any tournaments?
Yeah, as a kid, but our gym really didn't have too many. Like, it wasn't like the All Valley tournament. Like, we didn't have that thing. That was just another inside reference to Cobra Kai and Karate Kid. But we didn't have that stuff because at the time, your gym had to front the money for that to get the people to go there because they didn't have too many things. Because they had King of the Cage, which was the precursor, like an amateur, like very little rules and very like, raw. And so you had to go to Edmonton. So you could go to there if your gym would qualify, but you had to fit the bill.
Right.
So at the time, when it was very stigmatized and they didn't break that fifth or fourth wall, then, there was times when my instructor wasn't dodging punches and kicks, he was dodging the bill collectors. So, I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but, I'm just saying, like, the tournament scene was more for me on the judging side. So, we do the kids' tournaments, and then I'd learn how to judge points.
I see what you mean.
Or I'd see the demo team, and then I'd see how they'd be, like, breaking boards or jumping or, like, doing shoulder rolls over, like, tables. Like, that table, like, it'd basically roll over. And then they'd set up, like, a little, bamboo sticks or, like, a window, and you have to go through the window.
Interesting.
And so that, like, gave me a different perspective. Like, it's not just kicks and punches. It's like, well, they were trying to put it in practical terms because that was part of the discipline. It was like a full-rounded martial. It was like not just fighting, the art of fighting, but it was self-defense. So what's self-defense? It's not just kicking a punch. It's like if you fall off your bike, if you build that muscle memory to do shoulder roll, then you fall off, you don't hit your face, you protect yourself, or you roll out because you're so used to it that you tuck your head into your chin, you roll on your shoulder blade, and you stand up.
Yeah.
And it happened a few times where, maybe I'd fall off something, and then I know how to fall more straight on my back like a wrestler.
Fall. Yeah.
And then I'd dust myself off and be fine. Like, I could have broke a normal man. And I'm like, not me.
That's really cool, man.
Yeah.
So I don't know much about Hapkido.
Yeah.
Is the fighting style, like you said, a little bit more about the history. I guess that's what I'm asking, more about the history of Hapkido. Did the fighting style originally have, like, everything in it?
Well, it was originally karate. So this traditional stuff that you see on, like, Karate Kid. And that's what it was. And then it was just a Southern Korean style that we had adopted because each, how should I put it, like, dojo had to kind of identify for, like, identification purposes and business-wise. But we were always what mixed martial arts was intending to be. Just like, okay, not a style, but a way of fighting. So normal fighting, you wouldn't just use your fists. You'd use your elbow, you'd bend the arm, you'd fall to the ground, and then they'll just ended up having to be named and categorized as style. So jiu-jitsu wasn't a style we did. We were just grappling because some fights go to the ground and some guys trying to choke you out. So we learned how to do different maneuvers of, like, arm bars and rear naked chokes and stuff like that. So we could, like, have more tools in our arsenal. And then we learned how to develop our chi so that our core would be strong. So that when we did attacks, we'd put the most effect with the least amount of energy, which would be advantageous to us, because if we exerted all our energy on one opponent and there's 2, 3, 4 other opponents jumping us, we're gassed out by the first opponent. We're losing just on lack of energy. But if I'm able to hit you in like, let's say in your solar plexus, and I wind you, and then you're knocked out for like 2 minutes, then I got time to run, or I got time to worry about the next person and focus my energy there. So it was all like a mentality more than actual like what style. It's like, okay, here's a jab, here's a cross, but there's also like a crane movement.
Right. That's really cool.
And then why is that advantageous? Because a punch is a closed fist, and yeah, that might be stronger, but now if you know another way of blocking a punch with a crane, then when you come down, you can also grab the arm.
Right.
So like you could either, like a punch comes and you'd hit it up like this, and then your palm strike would hit it down. But in this style, you could hit up, and then on the down, you could also grab and pull the guy into the second punch and carry the combo over. So it was like we were doing more of a lifestyle.
Like it's like MMA basically, but like really early. That's really cool. So your instructor, was that his back? It sounds like his background was karate.
Yeah, and he was kind of like Jason David Frank. If you ever seen the original Green Power Ranger in his MMA fighting career, that's what he was doing. And he wasn't doing it hardcore, but he was. And then later on, when the parkour craze got into effect, then he was adapting that in there and teaching more balance and stuff like that. But yeah, his was straight karate.
That's cool. And so all the stuff that he picked up, like grappling, like judo throws, like he just like picked it up from being a fighter and then just made it a thing in his school.
He wasn't actually like a professional fighter, but his sensei too, like straight came from the original teachings of the martial arts. And then he'd go to Japan or China every so often to like he felt not just for vacation's sake, but just to be part of the culture.
Right.
To be in it. And he felt, if he went to go train for a week with some like master sensei guy, then he could bring that to us and dissect it over like months of teaching. And then he'd feel more authentic about what he's teaching.
Right. And that's like, I feel like that's really the evolution of martial arts, right? Because in the beginning, like prior to MMA, prior to Bruce Lee, it really was, your style versus my style, even at the very first UFC, it was boxer versus wrestler, jiu-jitsu versus karate guy. There was no one, it wasn't until like the third UFC that they had hybrid guys who were showing like, no, I trained a bit of this. So if this guy takes it here, I'm pretty good as well, right? And that's really the philosophy of fighting today. Like now, you might meet a guy who is a taekwondo instructor or a karate guy, but at his school, he's teaching people like, all right, the fight goes to the ground. This is what to do, right? Because it's just, like you're saying, it just makes you a more competent fighter, right? Like, we have in jiu-jitsu, the lineage that I came from, basically, one of the guys, he trained with a wrestler a lot of the time, and Sambo guys, he would actually go to those tournaments, and he would come back and be like, look, what we're doing is very effective here, but whenever we go to their matches, it looks like if we put our head down, they're going to do this to us. So why don't we do it this way, And what that does is it improves the art, right?
And the reason they started with not to cut you off, but like, I don't know if it happened on that very first match, but the reason it was like not as versatile as some of the fighters, because they didn't have they were adapting it from King of the Cage, which was a lot more amateur style, and it didn't have the complete rule set or the stuff to bring it to like a professional level. So they had to like streamline it and add some rules to it and clean it up a bit, because they were like literally like when you're doing King of the Cage, it was a blood sport.
Right.
So like it was like a movie about it too. And the way you'd win is basically like what they did with the old Rampage fights, where you just beat the guy until either submission or until he was a bloody pulp and couldn't stand up.
Right.
So you'd beat the guy, and if he wobbled and couldn't get up, kind of like a boxing match, he'd end the fight.
Right.
And so the reason there was like a wrestling guy versus a jiu-jitsu guy or whatever that style was, because they were poaching guys from other ones because they didn't have professional leagues at the time.
Right.
Like they had professional wrestling on a sports entertainment level, but someone who was like a championship like kickboxer, they would peak at the Olympics, but they wouldn't have that like NHL, NBA level kind of profession.
Right.
And so they were poaching them up to give credibility to the first rounds of fighters. And if you remember, I think it was Randy Couture, one of the earlier fighters, they were even fighting in gis.
In UFC?
Yeah, they had the gis on, and they had to get rid of it because when people were doing joint manipulation, like, chicken wings and arm locks and stuff like that, then it would get stuck in there and the referee couldn't see properly.
Right.
And then it would get tangled up in the guy's kind of like belt or something, and then he could like break a finger or something.
I saw, like, just because the rules, again, it was just like, it was the first time they had really set it up. In the first UFC, there was a guy who fought with one boxing glove.
Yeah.
And his reasoning was that if he had to grapple, he still has his fingers, but he's a boxer naturally, so he needs to have one.
Yeah.
But it's just how, it's so crazy, right? And then, there was obviously, like, the jiu-jitsu guys fighting in a gi. So it was just a mess, right? But it had to develop to what it is now.
Even Ronda Rousey, if you look at her career, she originally was a championship wrestler. That's where she came from, like trying to go to the Olympic section. So it was, and now she's like a complete fighter because the UFC you have to be. But it's very interesting how the inception of that was created. Because it just came from bare knuckle blood sport fighting, and to where it is now. It's just a shame that they couldn't have treated it with a bit more respect, because we all know Conor McGregor, how crazy he is.
Yeah, yeah.
But I wanted to ask you a question.
Yeah.
You said you had been started to mix them. We talked about this a bit off camera, but I just want to see if you can highlight some points, because I am putting out this project at one point in my life, and you are working on it. Is there any highlights or kind of interesting experience you had in mixing, mastering my project? Maybe you heard a lyric or something. I didn't expect it. Whoa, that's a cool idea. You could tell the fans that they could look out for if they want to.
I think so far so good, man. Like, really, I still need to listen to it because I've been mastering individual songs, but cohesively, what I'm noticing is that it is a theme, right?
Yeah.
Like it's very much so. Yeah, you are able to keep that consistent. Like the last thing we worked on together was the skit, right? That's going to be track 14.
Yeah.
And I can just tell, like, I've mixed that one now, and I can just tell the thought that you even put into that, right? Like, just how it feels like, from what I've heard, it sounds like you really did take the time to construct a world within the album, right? You're listening to it, and you're hearing these, like, skits of what's happening in the radio, even, like, your lyrics are related to the theme, overall, the theme of the radio. Do you have a title for this album?
Yeah, it's called The Power Is Yours. And I'll just do a quick synopsis of how I came up with this, because I was telling you this off camera. But I had heard, because I was in religious turmoil. And, I was born and baptized as a Christian. But through learning martial arts, spirituality and Buddhism teachings, and they all started to be relevant to me. And at the time, they were very, like, strict. Like, you're Christian or you're not Christian. And if you're not Christian, please leave, because you're offending me. And it was hardcore at the time, especially like you came from an Eastern European background. They really frowned upon you having different spiritual, religious opinions. And I wanted a more complete kind of universal spirituality, not be so religious based, that you have to be Muslim and then be offended if I speak about, someone says God on my record, and then you have to be like, oh, he's speaking because he's a Christian. I'm like, no, I want to talk about spirituality like a Buddhist would, or like Mr. Miyagi would. And so I saw many times Carlos Santana, because I was a big fan of him at the time and still am to this day, and he was talking, we came from the light. And then I used to learn light theory in school, and I thought, what a cool concept, because I like color, as I was alluding to Power Rangers.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to explain. So what is it? What is the theory?
Yeah, well, the theory is that, like, we come from the light, the sun.
Right, sorry.
And some people think that's God, some people think that's Mother Nature.
Okay.
And then we, at some point in our evolution, that light materialized into a corporeal form. Like I said in my intro, like we became human beings with a conscious mind and aware of life and death and feelings and all that. And so I ran with this concept, and I'm like, okay, let's talk about multiple albums. And this is where I get too carried away sometimes. And I'm like, how can I make it kind of like Nas's album? Because I didn't really care for Nas, and no offense, but I thought it was cool how he had his first couple albums, the same kind of background, the same kind of transparent face, but he'd be like a kid, and then a teenager, and then an adult.
Right,
and for 3 albums, and I thought that would be cool to have it like that, because everyone was doing sequels at the time. And I loved carrying story arcs through, so it's not just like random, okay, one's blue and one's green. And let's have colors, and let's have shapes, and let's have something that's cohesive. So then I was like, okay, let's talk the first album, which I'm also developing, about space.
Okay.
And that talks about colors and from the light spectrum.
Right.
And then that's why the second album, which you're mixing and mastering now, is about the radio, because that's the next kind of frequency in the light spectrum.
Interesting.
And then I always thought to myself, it was a big thing back in the 90s. I don't know if it's a big thing now with Spotify and YouTube and Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. But it was like, if you had your stuff on the radio, whether you were Spice Girls, Kelly Clarkson, or Snoop Dogg, it was, you made it. Even more than being in the Saddle Dome or being at the Grammys. Like, if you got your song on the radio, you were legit MC, you were legit singer. So it was like, I was so heavily scrutinized by my peers and the people in the industry, the promoters and 10 to 10, for not being what their vision of an artist should be, creatively and aesthetically. So I was like, well, what happens if I was on the radio? What would that sound like? Because I'm very creative and very abstract, so let's see if I can go even further on the abstract level and not be weird, but like show an alternative. And so then I saw an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, it's an old kid show.
Okay.
And the kid was in the car, and his brother was making fun of him and trapped him in this hearse because he was I don't know why he was fixated by death and mortuaries and spooky things and horror movies. And so he trapped him in this mortuary. And he was screaming to get out. I was like, hey, let me out, you know? And then the radio just started turning the dial to one that wasn't part of the spectrum, the number. And the whole episode was about shifting to the afterlife. And they confused this kid for another kid. So Gilbert Godfrey, who was that big annoying voice from the 90s, who did that Red Bird character on Aladdin. You know, that big obnoxious, kind of character. So he was on there as the gatekeeper to the next life, and he confused the kid. And every time he'd go on the radio or something, it weirdly shift into that spot. And no matter how he turned the dial, it would always go to that unique part. It was still part of the radio, but it was kind of like it wasn't there on the number spectrum, the dial. And so I thought that would be a really cool concept, you know? And I was big into wrestling. I was like, well, they call some wrestlers parts unknown. So why wouldn't they put mine instead of AM or FM or XM, question mark M. And then the radio part would be like not 105.5 or 98.2. It'd be like question mark, question mark, question mark. And 3 question mark because I'm Rudolf the Third and 3 is my thing. So then I started developing this concept of like, what happens if I was on the radio? What would that sound like? So I went on SoundClick, which was the producer website at the time, and I hooked up with the guy, Young Marquise, who's now in Def Jam, and he's an R&B singer. Okay. By the time, he was like Polo Solo, making beats and producing music. Okay. And so I pitched him the idea. I'm like, okay, I'll pay you money, $100, $200. And pretend you're like a disc jockey. And you're cool with me being from Canada. I'm cool with you being from... So let's kind of, you know, put that brotherly love to test and synergize those two things. And then when you hear the first album, he's like, I got a different feeling for y'all. I got this homie from Canada. And it kind of really intros it in. And I was like, for the longest of time, I was thinking, well, if you're doing your album, you got to be the first vocal on the track so people understand whose track it is. But I'm like, well, P. Diddy for years, if you know the Mace and the Biggie records, he was always introing the guys in there, introducing Mace from Harlem World. I kind of thought that would be cool if it was like a real radio, or they would have like Ryan Seacrest or Casey Kasem or whatever, you know, introing me in. And then the rest of the album would be me. And then I would put little hints of like the dial changing, and it would be symbolic of no matter where you change it. It was time to hit that right groove. And that song that came on, whether you liked it or not, or you were in your own headspace, it just seemed to make sense with you. That's kind of how I came up with the radio album. And then later on, it's going to go into like different stuff. Like I got the next one after that is Streetlights. And then I got another one that goes around different countries, you know, like an adventure. So that's like the guiding light. And so there's all these themes about lights, you know, and then the one of my albums that, you know, is about streetlights, it's called not the Walk of Shame, but the Walk of Pride. And then it's X'd out the shame, and you put pride because you're rising above it. You know, so it's all these elements. And that's why I called it The Power Is Yours. Besides that question mark radio stuff, because at the end of the song, the 3 R's, which is at the end of the whole project, and there's that crazy long note I was talking about, I thought, well, if I'm making it very dramatic ending, saying the power's yours, I'm holding it for like an extremely long amount of time, that would be so epic if I called it The Power's Yours, and you'd pick up the album and you'd be like, now the power's in my hands. And the juxtaposition of like, no, the power should be in my hands because I'm the MC guiding you through, the woes or the whatever from the path of wickedness to righteousness. But I'm like, no, I'm giving you the power. So basically it was like, I'm empowering you. Like I did that other story to tie together where that friend of mine was leading down a bad path of drinking Red Bulls and smoking dope. And I empowered him to be a physiotherapist and I have a family and save lives or rehabilitate people. And I'm like, that's what I want to do with my music. I want to put the tools that are necessary for you to be empowered, to put on that clown makeup, for me to put on the dress, for Polo Solo to be confident enough to put me on his podcast and let me speak my mind and not be scared about that, you know? And then that's kind of how a long-winded way it all worked out like that. So when you hear it, that's why it's very like almost like a film score or a movie, because I always thought the traditional album, not even from the Bad Boy era or the old school era, but just like, I heard even Janet Jackson albums where they would just like do funny little skits on there, or they like introed in and there'd be like a nice like scene there. And I'm like, I want it to be like a movie when you're listening to it. It was like you have a film score part, you have a skit, something that relates to radio, like maybe the disc jockey saying, all right, we're back with a public service announcement. Thank you for staying tuned this far, and kind of that feel. So you could feel like you're listening to radio, not an album. And then that'd be cool. And be like, okay, if this guy was on the radio, this is what it could sound like. And so that's kind of, in a long-winded way, my explanation.
No, that's cool. So when can people expect this album?
Well, definitely either this year or next year. So once I get the funds, because COVID's a jerk, and I can finish the couple, 3-4 tracks of my space album, then I put that out there.
Oh, so you want to put the space album before the radio album? I see. It's just,
in meeting you, that was the project I'd ready to mix. And you offered me, I didn't want to blow the opportunity. And I'm like, it's going to be on my hard drive, ready to go.
Yep.
And the reason I put the space album out first, because it's just in the chronological order of the light spectrum.
Right.
So lights and then radio, if you look at the wavelengths, right? And because if you listen to that skit we did, where I was doing the intro part, and I talk about how that triangular came to reality or was created. That's kind of how I wanted to start off my projects, kind of like introducing myself as a character, as a persona, and then going into the subsequent projects that follow that. But I didn't want to put out the radio first and then scratch their heads and then understand, well, why is he explaining himself later on?
Right. So makes sense.
Intro yourself first, introduce yourself, and then show what you got. So it's kind of the whole antithesis of that, and then just keep going from there.
Yeah. Damn, that's really cool, man.
So I wanted to ask you, if you were to tell the viewers, I wasn't here right now, and you wanted to tell them why they should check out my music or something about me as an artist, from just getting to know me so far, what would you say in like a few words about me?
I would say like so far so good. Like even the lyrics I've heard from you, I would say perspective. You know, I would say you're definitely bringing a different perspective, you know, to music in general, and even just from what we've gotten from this, you know, interview, like, you know, just you talking about how like you want your album, you want your song, you know, you want your stage presence to be able to give that next person the confidence to embrace their truth, right?
That's right.
And yeah, I feel like, you know, that's such a unique perspective. I work with so many different artists, and every artist has their message, right? But I feel like that's definitely it's a unique approach that you're using, and not just with the music, you know, with how you're presenting yourself, whether it's on stage, whether it's at this podcast, or, you know, just coming ready, just with this album, right? With all you're putting together with the album, there's so many themes. There's so many different elements that make this album have a theme, right?
Yeah.
And so sorry. So your question was like, you know, what would make someone check this person out? And I would say perspective, really.
Yeah.
Definitely an interesting perspective, Rudolf the Third. Yeah, you know, and if anything else, for the same reason why I would check anyone out, you're passionate about the music, you know, and that's the real reason why you should check this person out, even if you're like, I can't fuck with his perspective, you know. I mean, and that's not going to be because you have a genuine perspective. But even if that is the case, you know, you can still, at least from this interview, at least from any song of yours that you listen to, you can hear like this person is passionate about what they're doing. They're not just trying to make a song today and not be here tomorrow, right?
Well, what was your perspective? Like, I don't know how far you've gotten in the mixing and mastering process, but when you're like, and this is no fault to you, but you're just going through and thinking you're going to get another song, and then you get like a sound bite, or maybe you get a skit, or you're like, wait, this guy just did a whole poem on this track and there's no rap, there's no singing. Like when stuff like that comes to you, and maybe it's serendipity, I don't know, but what is your like thoughts when you hear, not even me, but just someone do something that's like out there, a bit more creative? Are you like surprised? You're like, okay, cool, whatever.
No, again, I work with different artists, and man, like I definitely, there's so many different things that happen on records, but I would say like, and that's, at the end of the day, like, I don't want to hear some generic shit. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, it's a breath of fresh air if I'm listening to the song, and like you said, like you have the one where you're just introing Triangular, right? Like, and the whole, you know, it's almost like a poem, the whole song, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And yeah, like it's refreshing for me as a music fan, right? Because if I want to listen to generic shit, I'll go onto this, you know, the Spotify hip hop playlist, and they'll give me all the industry handpicked stuff, right? Like, but as a music fan, I want to hear some stuff that's gonna be like, you know, I want to hear you take a risk, because even all of my favorite artists, you know, they are my favorite artists because maybe they had a one song or one project or something that was like blew my mind. And now when I check for them, like, oh, I hear this, like The Weeknd's one of my favorite artists, and I hear that he just dropped a new album, I'm listening, not just to have my mind blown again. He's done that already. I'm listening, you know what I mean, for something different. You know what I mean? Like I'm not, you know what I mean? Because like for The Weeknd, for example, he's someone who can do the same thing every single time, and it probably will sell because he has a great voice. But he pushes himself. I can hear it on the pride, and that's what I admire about him as an artist. He pushes himself to the point where I'm listening to this new album. Yeah, he's gonna do some familiar things, but a track is gonna come up and I'm like, what is this he's doing on here, you know? And I'm either gonna not like it or like it, but he's giving me that opportunity, right? You're either gonna gain a fan or not, you know what I mean? And so,
what are you hoping from me now that we've spoken for a duration of time, and I kind of said my 2 cents on certain topics? You're talking about pushing, and you like that. So if you were to fantasize about like what else you'd not expect, but like it would be cool if Rudolf the Third went this, or why doesn't he try this? Is there anything that you'd like to say to me and to the fans out there that maybe you'd like for me to consider doing in the future, or a topic, or why don't you try this?
So far so good. Like again, like I do need to listen to this project in cohesive order because again, I'm just mixing songs at random. But so far, like no, I would say there's not been any two tracks that really sound alike. You know,
because what we discussed and hopefully. Polo Solo can get confidence to do this. I'd really encourage you if he did try this and say this in the message board below. But we were talking about the 5/4. I remember off camera he was asking me technically how the 3/4 in particular and the 5/4 work. And you know, it's just a concept I threw out. You don't have to do it, but that's a realm I would like to try moving forward, is to do an actual rap. Because I have the structure, I just need to practice it. I have a few stuff I was doing, and I sent you that verse about dinosaurs in the email, and that was a 6/8. I think it was a 5/4, 6/8 or something.
Who was that by?
That was by me. I wrote that.
Oh, interesting.
And you know, that's just something that I would like to try. I don't know if you're interested in, but you know, it's something we could discuss in later.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I guess to answer your question, what should you try? Just try more stuff, like because and where I was going with that is like so far, like I haven't heard any two songs that sound the same. You know what I mean? So to even tell you like try more stuff almost sounds redundant because it sounds like that's what you're doing. You know what I mean? You know, so
is that a good thing? Do you think like for longevity in a career, or is it just like going too far?
100%. Because I do believe like. Whoever is your favorite artist right now, they're only your favorite artist right now because they're doing something you love, right? And if they do this thing that you love for the next 3 albums, by the 3rd album, you'd be like, come on, bro, it's been 5 years, you know, you're still doing the same thing. And so I think it's imperative to growth as an artist. Like anyone who I've called an artist, who I bring up The Weeknd because that's someone I put up there in like my top 5 of artists. Every single time, every year that I'm gonna say his name, he's done something to blow my mind that year. You know what I mean? And that's part of being an artist. If you find a lane and you're like, this is my lane, I'm comfortable here. You know, like you'll grow. You'll have your small people that support you, but it'll never grow beyond that. You have to keep adapting. That's the music game as well. Like you know, we're talking about how like there was this was happening in this generation before there was this generation. Like it keeps changing. It keeps morphing. What was happening in the 90s is not happening now, and it probably is not going to happen anytime soon again. It's an ever-changing thing, the music game.
What do you think? We were talking off camera about a few things, but I wanted into particular talk about 2 things. You're talking about the 3rd rhyme or the 3rd verse in a song. Now, what is your opinion on the 3rd verse? Do you think it's part of hip-hop? Like you were telling me something about it was kind of a status symbol. Like if you could do a 3rd rhyme, it kind of made you more of a legit MC. Don't quote me because I don't know what you said to the fullest extent, but that's kind of just I got it. What's your opinion on the 3rd verse?
Yeah, man, exactly that. Like that. I feel like in 90s hip hop, it definitely was. You know, it was just like the stamp of an MC, right? Like you need to be doing 3 verses on your songs to be an actual MC. I feel like in modern day, you know, where there are now subgenres of hip hop where the songs can be 1 minute 22 seconds long, and it has incredible playback value. It's getting to the point where you as the artist have to know, like, you know. So I'm not gonna say death to the 3rd verse. I'm saying there needs to be a balance in present day time, where you as the artist have to know when, all right, I have a great hook here. I have a great narrative here. I've already told perspective 1 here, perspective in verse 1. I've told perspective 2 in verse 3. I feel like to really summarize what I'm encompassing in this hook, there needs to be a 3rd verse to conclude it, right? Like, so that's what I'm saying. There's always, you know what I mean? So there almost always will be a song where you're like, this has to have a 3rd verse. This is just, you know what I mean? But they'll almost always, and just in the way the game is today, will be a song where the hook is incredible. The hook is the song. And you just need 1 verse with it, or maybe just 2 verses, right? And I think the conversation we're having is that just as an MC, you don't want to be, you don't want to just have that in your head, like, oh no, I'm an MC. I'm gonna do 3 verses on this song. They really should just be a minute long, you know. I'm still a hip hop head. I'm still like an old school hip hop head. But at the end of the day, I'm an engineer as well, and I work with a lot of modern artists, and I listen to a lot of modern music, and I know that, the old way, there can be a really lyrical rap song that's 2 minutes long, right? And at that length, it's a hit song in today's market.
Well, look at that song. I don't know what it's called, by Redman and Method Man, where they're doing that like la 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 in the middle, the end of their song, and that one is like 2.5 minutes. But like my kind of, I guess, follow-up question, even if you don't consider like needing a third verse, do you think it's a cop-out or just a personal preference to add a guitar solo or a scratch solo, like let the DJ have his moment on one of the tracks instead of having a third verse?
No, because at the end of the day, man, this is what I was saying, is just like it needs to just be like genuine. Like on my last album I did, let me think, maybe there were like 2-3 songs. There are 12 songs on the album. Maybe there were 2-3 songs that had third verses.
Yeah.
But I felt like for those songs, like for the for the narrative of the story or whatever, I had to have a third verse on the song. I just feel like at the end of the day, like just coming back to even what you're asking me about, like what should you do, moving forward as an artist. I just feel like it's creativity at the end of the day. Yeah. There is no formula, when hip hop is still such a young genre, you know what I mean? It's not even like 70 years old.
No.
It's a very young genre. So in the beginning, with things like, all right, for it to be a hip hop track, it has to have a scratch hook on it. It has to have 3 verses. It has to have a boom bap beat. It has to be sampled from one of these, classic funk records.
Yeah.
I just feel like because it's such a new thing, it was easy to be like, all right, this is what we're gonna describe as hip hop. We're gonna have to have these things. But as hip hop has grown, to the point where it blurs the lines between so many different genres now, you can't hold it to that. Like, if you know what I mean, if we were holding hip hop to it has to have a scratch hook, it has to have a break beat, and it has to have 3 verses, then a lot of the shit that came out this year is not hip hop.
No.
You know what I mean? Like,
and for me, I flipped the script in such an abstract way that you'll probably thank me for this, but I don't see the third verse like you see the third verse. I kind of see, like, when I'm writing concepts, like I had a song in my early days, one person's trash is another person's treasure, that easily could have gone 6-7 verses. And I'll tell you why. Because when I write and consider verses, it's not always about the linear narrative, it's about the abstract concept. So I would like talk about colors or talk about something, and then it's like, well, what's your opinion on that? What's your version of what's trash and treasure? So I talked about like the song at 3 verses, but the reason I say it's more, because we kept upping the ante. It's like I was talking about a record. That's 100% trash. One person sees the garbage record, another person finds a sample, cuts the whack part out of the record, makes a new beat, and they're amazing again. Mm-hmm. And then the second was talking about someone threw away a Bible, and the other person found in the trash and was saved by God, and that was their kind of awakening. And then the third verse talks about knowledge, and how, someone could say something, goes in one ear and comes out the other, and other people can let that marinate and use that to their advantage, because when they're in a sticky situation, bam, that knowledge is there. They got that extra tool, and now they can prevail. So that's how I treat kind of like third verses and fifth verses, because when I grew up, it was like you had the main 2 or 3 verses, and then you put like 1 million of guest MCs on there who were hot at the time, everywhere from Busta Rhymes to Fabulous to Ludacris on one track, not only to show the solidarity of hip-hop rappers, because gangster rap and rap in general is very like pitting against each other. Biggie versus Tupac, Nas versus Jay-Z, Eminem versus the whole pop landscape. And so it was like, when they came together, it was like, oh, I want to see what they thought of that opinion. So it was more not like narrative progressing, but it was like their opinion or their version of that. And then you were just like, you can go even like 8 verses, because there's like each MC had their own topic and their own cadence and flow. And like E40, he's not going to rap like Busta Rhymes. Busta Rhymes is going to go 2 miles a minute, or he's going to do leaders of the old school kind of bombastic raps. So you never knew what you're getting. But then you got KRS-One, who was so lyrical at the time. They beat everyone on a lyrical tip, but then it was like 2 different styles, right? And it was like so cool. It's like that song now had a re-envisionment on it. And that's kind of how. But another quick topic that I wanted to ask you, and this has been bugging me for a long time, so you're kind of a hip-hop guy. Maybe you can say your opinion on it. You might not get a definitive answer, but here we go. When they talk about the four or the elements of hip-hop, how come fashion is never considered a fifth element of hip-hop? Like, technically speaking. Because the four elements of hip-hop, and they only stopped at four, was DJing, like scratching and mixing records, breakdancing, so beat girls and beat boys, graffiti, which is the art, and MCing. Well, we can all argue that you can't say hip-hop without its fashion. But how come you don't think it was considered a fifth element, like technically?
I don't know. I feel you definitely today I would say it is an element because all the biggest guys like a Kanye West, like his name is big in the fashion industry, right? Like
that's right.
Just in all, like Jay-Z sold Rockaware, Diddy sold Sean John, like, you know, so hip hop and fashion is synonymous now. But you know what I think it is? I think like hip hop had to make money for it to get to the point where you could be like, oh, he's wearing hip hop fashion or he's wearing hip hop. Because I feel like, how would I put it? Prior to hip hop, what everyone was wearing in the streets was, you know, it was like the clothes. It was normal. You know, it wasn't fashion. It wasn't, you know, it was when hip hop came that, you know, it made not just what was going on in the streets or in the like the ghetto areas. It made like people in the suburban areas look over there and be like, oh, what's going on there? And I almost feel like initially it really wasn't guys trying to be like, all right, this is how I'm dressing. It's just like they were already dressing differently from what the mainstream was dressing like. So it looked like, you know, there was that. But to answer your question, to the best of my ability, I feel like what those four things have in common is like, you know, there are crafts that, you know, really there are crafts that are available to you in like a gentrified neighborhood, in like a really bad place. If you have, you know, you don't have any education, you don't have anything else to do, you can rap. You can rap. You still need you be literate enough to write a rap.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
For the most part, if you can speak, there are people who they can't write, but they can construct good verses, right? Like, because they can construct it in their heads. So rapping, graffiti, again, you need the paint, but again, it is one of those things where it's a low income thing you can get, like you can steal the paint and it is a craft there. And then what else?
Well, there's breakdancing.
Breakdancing, again, it's its own craft, and DJing, which is...
And graffiti and all that, right? I think the reason that it's not considered one, and you know, respectfully, I disagree with some of what you said, because what I think is the hip-hops were originally considered on techniques and stuff that you actually had to like practice and learn, like a skill set.
Right. I think that's what I was, sorry, my bad. I think that's what I was trying to say.
But like, it totally is, because if you know Dapper Dan and the history of him, he was, and what Play did from Kid and Play, like he was basically the fashion designers of Salt and Pepper and their whole kind of gimmick. Like if you go through history and like look at Farnsworth Bentley, P. Diddy's like butler, like he basically brought the gentleman style. He even had like a 2 or 3 seasons of G's to Gents where that was like a forefront. And not only like FUBU, but all the stuff they did in the 90s with Rockaware, Fat Farm, Sean John, Timberland, like, you know, and then look at like the song My Adidas. Look at the 2 songs Nelly did with My J's, and he did Air Force Ones with his crew at the time. Like there's legitimate like music videos talking about fashion. So I think that's why, in my personal opinion, it's not considered, because it's not like a technique that you can practice and learn. But aside from that, I think like, you know, if they go back in hip hop, I think it should really consider it as a fifth element, because it's just so synonymous with like a break dancer, and they don't wear a suit to do a break dance or like trousers. They specifically wear this. This is something that you consider MCing, DJing, all the elements this is it.
I mean, so did Dapper Dan, was he like tailoring that stuff? Well,
what the story was he was like an entrepreneur, and he opened up a fashion house like the 100% Legit did back in the day. If you remember that clothing store that was on 17th Avenue. And he used to like take old, like, you know how they were like sampling records at the time. And at the start, they didn't have proper clearance. They were just sampling whoever was dope, and they kind of like almost like making like a remix of it. So he took Louis Vuitton, he took Versace, he took kind of logos and remixed it and did it in his own style. So he redesigned those in a hip hop fashion. And then, don't fully quote me on this, but like normal people couldn't afford his clothes because he'd be a bit too higher end.
So was he sewing? Was he making new stuff?
Yeah, he was at the time. And then later he hired people when the business got a bit bigger. So he basically designed the concepts and someone like execute it. But at the start, he was doing it to some of it, like as an actual tailor. And then he'd take the logos and then he'd like maybe do silk screening or he'd do some way to like add them to his vision of what the garment was. And later on they sued him on copyright infringement. By the time, it was like a Vanilla Ice record. You could take a Queen sample from his bridge line and it'd be okay because they didn't have the rules back then. And then no one could afford his clothes. So then he'd keep his store open late night, like at the end. Like just imagine like 9 o'clock close. He'd be open until 2 in the morning because the gangsters and pimps, that's the only time he can come. Or Mike Tyson was synonymous. He'd come after a fight in Vegas and then wherever he was fighting, and he'd go to Dapper Dan, hop on a plane. He'd go there at night because he'd be making Skrilla, cheddar cash, whatever you want to call it, and then he'd just buy 5 outfits custom made. Because that was the thing. And then he built his reputation in the ghetto. And then later on, the ghetto entrepreneur started taking over. And then, Sean John became a thing in Timberland. But yeah, no, he was legit. And then, like I said before, Kid was kind of the MC, kind of the writer. And Play was kind of like, he was rapping too, and he was part of it too. But he was like the showman. So then, they were on tour with Salt and Pepper and stuff, so he designed their actual get-ups. So when you see like the Push It video and some of the other ones with those big leather jackets and stuff, that was Play. He did that stuff. And then it was cool because a lot of those stuff was like, very new at the time. And so it was, I think it's a fifth element, but I don't know, to each their own, I guess.
Yeah, no, I feel like it is right now. But again, going back, I feel like it's almost a combination of what we both said. I feel like the reason why it wasn't was, like you said, because it wasn't a craft like graffiti, like DJing, like breakdancing, like rapping. Yeah. Rapping is a craft you can put nights into, right? You can put hours into. Whereas, and that's why I was asking specifically, was he sewing the clothes? Yeah. If you're coming up with ideas for, new outfits and you're getting the fabric together and sewing it, then by all means, that is a craft. Oh, yeah. But I think it wasn't one of the initial elements because of the capital necessary, right? Like all these guys you can list right now, like Sean John, Rockaware, Fubu, those are all corporations, right? So there had to be money in hip hop before you could go and say, all right, I'm doing fashion. It almost, I feel like today, because of because of the world, you can source fabric from Amazon or wherever and get a sewing machine and whatever, get some stuff. So I feel like today it's a craft, but I feel like why it wasn't one of the initial crafts was because of that like barrier.
I just feel it's so synonymous. It's like how cowboys have their own kind of stereotypical cowboy hat and cowboy boots with the jeans on, the blue jean that's either Wrangler, Levi's. Hip hop, especially what I'm wearing, this would be considered a traditional hip hop outfit.
Okay, but let me ask you this though, like a cowboy, like you would say the cowboy old Western lifestyle consisted of, I don't know, like riding horses, listening to country music, being able to like hog tie a cow or whatever. But would within all those like so I guess this is what I'm trying to say. If the cowboy, someone who considers himself a cowboy should be able to have these crafts under their belt, like riding a horse, being able to tie, all that stuff. Would you say like creating fashion for their look, would you say that should be a craft they should have?
Well, yeah, that is somewhat of a craft. Like sewing, like being a tailor is, if you think of it like a tailor, then it is, and it was back then too. Totally, because the way they constructed the fabrics and the construction of the cowboy hat, it was made from a sombrero.
Well, I guess this is what I'm saying though, like, and I don't know this for a fact, but just based off, Westerns and just my, just what I know. it did not seem obvious to me that those, the guys, the Western cowboys, they're good with their guns. Yeah. They're good with the ropes and riding horses. It didn't seem like they also made it, part of their craft to, weave cowboy hats and shirts.
No, but there was the elements like, horseback riding and the tending a farm was a skill. They had a specific like.
But we're talking about why fashion is not a skill.
Yeah,
Why it was not.
Well, I think it is from a tailor standpoint. If you're actually sewing it and coming up with it, like with what Dapper Dan and Play did from Kid and Play was they did that.
Exactly.
But maybe not Sean John. But I mean, it's semantics at this point now because I mean, when you're looking at like LL Cool J, he totally talks in interviews, even on Ellen, how Timberland boots, which were completely just like a hiking boot for like white guys or not any race, but just for camping and for hiking, and how that became a hip hop thing. And there's been documentaries on hip hop style, and even the movie Wild Style from back in the day was very synonymous with fashion as part of it. And so I guess
I'm playing devil's advocate at this point,
but
ahead. I just feel like because when you say fashion, when you say why isn't fashion like one of the core elements, the real reason is because me and you can say we're fashion guys. Like we like to pick outfits. Yeah. We like to look. We have to craft out what we're gonna look like. Yeah. But we don't actually get down into the sewing of what we're gonna be wearing.
No, we're more like stylists more so than.
And so I feel like that's the question as to why it was, because I'm sure when KRS-One was like, all right, who's hip hop here? Everyone raises their hands. All right, you break dance because that's a skill. That's it. I'm sure the fashion guy raises his hands like, yo, I'm swagged out every day, and he's,
No, totally. I mean, it's just an interesting point that I always thought was a controversial thing and not like a negative thing. I always felt like it was just an element that personally am I considering. But another question, and I don't want to keep you here too long, but when people talk about the Mount Rushmore politics and Mount Rushmore of wrestling, what do you think your Mount Rushmore of like hip hop would be?
I feel like it's different for different things. Definitely, if we're just talking rap, because when we say hip hop, I guess it's always so easy to leave producers out of the list, right? Like, but yeah, so like if it was to say rap, definitely Jay-Z goes up there for me. Nas, Biggie. Oh, man, I'll probably put Eminem up there, to be honest. Like, if I had to, honestly, it changes every day. I would rather do a top 10 than a top 5, but if I had to just leave it there, it would be those guys: Biggie, Jay-Z, Nas, and Eminem.
Yeah. See, mine was a bit trickier than yours, because I did put producer in there. I would have to say definitely, like I know everyone's wanting to put Eminem and LL in there, but I would definitely put Rick Rubin as one of my guys, because his versatility, like he basically not only started Def Jam, which was the pinnacle point of like the first major label that broke in as a credible, successful hip-hop label, and made LL Cool J, which is probably the best label run in hip-hop ever. He'd say 13 years on a label, which is incredible, and made an MC that was not only a great MC, but commercially viable. And he made Beastie Boys when white guys were being hated on. It was very racial, and he made them successful. And then he was doing, like, he worked with the Dixie Chicks at one point, and he was working with Lenny Kravitz. Like, Lenny Kravitz was staying at his home for one bit, so that's one of my guys. And then I would have to, and this is very controversial, I'd have to put in P. Diddy, because even though he did a lot of MCs wrong, like, the 90s was his, more or less. Like, you can't say that from even working with Pharrell and working with Timberland, but the mastermind of making, like, Biggie, like his fat, large guy from the ghetto selling crack and making him the larger-than-life character he was. Even though Biggie had the rhymes, he knew how to make him commercially viable, because he was doing hard rhymes back in the day, but he didn't know how to make that commercial appeal. And once he got with Diddy, it was history, right? He made him. So that would be one. And I definitely would have to put in, like, KRS-One, because he not only did rap and conscious rap, but if you know him, he's a Freemason. He's done actual lectures in high school or in colleges about hip hop culture. So he's like actually like those people who push the culture and are like spokesperson for it. And he did a whole video on his website about, you know, freestyle techniques and like just the things he said about it and teaching people how to freestyle better. So that would be my, and then the third one would be a wild card, but I would have to put, you know, Queen Latifah would be definitely my third, because Queen Latifah was so dope at the time that she was not only people thinking Lauryn Hill and India Reid, no, MC Lyte. The reason I put Queen Latifah, not because she's a queen, because she was one of the first female MCs who was brave enough to put UTNY. And her basically, like, I don't really swear, but she'd be kind of, don't call me a bitch. Just right off, which was very synonymous, a jab at all the men, all the misogyny in hip hop, and being like, you know, that don't treat me like that. I'm an equal. I can rap like you too. I can stand toe to toe with LL Cool J and Run DMC, and I can be just as dope. And I'm a female, and I don't have to, you know, stand for you. She was the first conscious rapper other than KRS One and later on Public Enemy that was really fighting the cause at the time. Like, even look at the old House Party videos, like number 2, House Party 2. Like, she was that main like freedom fighter character in the movie that really, like, when they went to college, she was trying to teach the one of the main female characters to really be more proactive and think, you know, more consciously about things. And then she got so dope at one point, not that she can't spit bars, because that's the crazy thing. She can spit bars to this day like no other. But still, what was interesting about her is she did jazz. She just did a 180 and went to jazz and sung, and she won a Grammy for it. So I'm like, those are my Mount Rushmore. P. Diddy, Queen Latifah, Rick Rubin, and the other person I said, and that's what I think. But yeah, so is there any last question that you think you'd want to ask me for the podcast? And get creative on this one, because I'm a deep thinker. I can go to the ends of the galaxy and back. No pun intended.
No, I feel you. Yeah, no, I was gonna add to, I feel like I definitely would. For me, I just can't have a like hip hop Mount Rushmore. It would just have to be like, if I was gonna do a producer one, I would have a producer one, right? It would be 4 different guys. If I was gonna do like an executive one, Diddy would definitely be in there for my executive one, and probably my producer one. No, just my executive one. Because for me, producer has to be able to make the beat, and Diddy did not make a lot of those beats. He was just like the mastermind that got the producers together and had the idea. Anyways, not getting into all of that, but I agree with your list as well. A lot of those guys are legends in hip hop, right? So yeah, final question for you. I guess, you know, where do you see yourself, you know, with your music in like 5 years?
Well, definitely building a relationship with you in a positive tip, like hopefully getting that show we discussed about earlier in the podcast to kind of tie it back. Putting out these 2-3 projects and just banging down doors, really getting that respect in not just hip-hop, but in music, you know, not being like apologetic, being like, can I speak to them and I really have product that I can prove to you my worth, and not just be talk, be action. So I really hopefully want to have a personal life, so not just like have the music, but being like that old sensei where now people can seek my wisdom. And, you know, being confident. And, you know, it's not just when I got the black belt and people calling me sir, I kind of felt somewhat proud and somewhat like, do I really deserve this? Am I ready to step up? And I'm like, if I ever have that doubt, I'm going to fail. So in 5 years, I definitely want to be a better version of myself, if nothing else. And carry on, because there's, you know, it's like the Volkswagen Golf. For 4 years or like a long time, it kept winning awards, and then 1 year it just all stopped. And they're like, why? Because it's already a good car enough. They're at its price point and its category. We can't really tweak anything else on it to make it a more better car. And then if I'm already dope, I just want to be doper. I don't want to be less dope. You know, if I'm positive and I want to inspire people, in 5 years I hope I actually did inspire more people and continue, because why would it be a bad thing to be like, okay, I made you put on that clown makeup indirectly, and that person became a physical therapist. Maybe another guy is going to be a social worker now because he thinks, oh, look at that guy. He touched the mic and he was trying to stand up for the little guy. And now maybe what he can't do with music, I can do with my social work and get in the community and maybe help some kids get off the street because I teach them, a little bit of scratching or teach them how to, think about the world differently. But my last question to you is, what would you define yourself as an artist? Like if someone was to check out Polo Solo and say, okay.
Polo Sho.
Show, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if someone, sorry about that, if someone was to you define yourself in like a little synopsis, like the back cover of a book would kind of give a synopsis of the book, what would they say you define yourself as?
I really like, I feel like my music is like a very thought-driven. In hindsight, I feel like this past year, I really have had a lot of time. Like I've been making music since I was 9 years old. And like I probably recorded like 3-4 mixtapes in high school, which are like scattered all over the internet. Like they're under my original name. And then as an artist, Polo Sho, I've released, 4 to 5 mixtapes, something like that. So I feel like for me, just listening to my own music and really getting to know myself, I feel like it's thought-driven music. And sorry, I feel like I'm going on a rant here, but to answer your question, it's if there was a book about Polo Sho and what would it say at the back, it would just, I feel like right now, and just even my most recent music of the last couple of years and moving forward, my music is really like an autobiography. I'm definitely the main subject of it, and it is really narrating what it takes to get to where I'm trying to go. That's really what every page is about.
I wasn't trying to say cookie cutter, but I was like, just in my opinion, like some of the stuff you said, the reason I'm asking that question in particular and about myself, so that when someone views this podcast and they don't know us that well, they can kind of get an idea what kind of an artist you are, what, to look out if they're expecting you. Obviously, you need to press play, and that kind of says the story for itself. But a lot of the times, you go to a Nelly, and you can kind of say, 2 cookie-cutter words. Okay, he's a upbeat rapper. He's a singer. He's a, so you can kind of give these kind of key hints. And you can be more philosophical. It's totally up to you. But I just wanted, when they see someone like me and you and they don't really know us, that they can kind of get understanding what to expect or what kind of an MC, so they can kind of, categorize us and then look for us and see us and kind of know about us. But it's totally up to you how you want to answer that.
If I was just supposed to use some words, again, thought-provoking, I would say conscious. What is the word?
Philosophical?
No, I want to say revolutionary, but it's what is the word for always pushing,
innovative?
Innovative, that's the word I'm looking for. Innovative. That's
not to be a wordsmith here, Brad.
No, that's good. Yeah, no, innovative, that's definitely what I'm trying to do with my music, is always trying to innovate, right? Always try to give people something that if they were listening to, Spotify radio, and so they just listen to a bunch of algorithm similar songs. If my song was to come up in that same thing, they've listened to 100, they'll be like, oh, this sounds different from, what I mean? Everything else I've heard, and that's, even if they're I don't know if I'm feeling it, if they said that, that's really what I'm, as an artist, who's been making music for so long. For me, I'm not trying to get inside the studio, find a sample, loop it and do verse, hook, verse, hook, verse, hook. You know what I mean? I want that if Sho from 2 days from now comes back and says, let me play you a song, that song is going to blow my mind, because Sho every other day is trying to fucking push, is trying to kill Sho from the previous day. You know
I totally
what I mean?
get you, because for me too, not just because I love different styles of music and I want to I'm ashamed about being hip-hop, so I'm going to like Bruce Springsteen just to be happy for my parents. It's no, I like, let's say, guitar solo or saxophone solo. And that's cool that speaks to me, but I'm not doing it in like a very contrived manner. I'm not doing it because, verse, chorus, and just flip it on them and blow their mind. I'm like, no, I want the music to be organic. I want to feel like, if there's a whole community of spoken word artists, and I kind of feel that's a precursor to rap, and that's something I was revered for, then why not flip the script and just being like, okay, let's put this to a beat and let's see if you can vibe for 3 minutes on this dope philosophical concept, and not just be so consumed that you need a hook, something catchy to get you there. You need like a guitar solo, someone to be like shredding it on the guitar to get you to vibe, to be like, I can see the cascading waterfall in the background of my vivid imagination and kind of being like, whoa, that's dope. He's really channeling something for me, speaking on a different level. I remember when, like I allude back to the Lauryn Hill Unplugged album, like people were so polarized by it because she decided to like do the folk thing for a minute, like, to get her guitar and to kind of play most of her songs like an acoustic set. And at the time, no one did that in hip-hop. That was a rock thing. That was a Lenny Kravitz thing. That was a Beatles thing. But that wasn't like a hip-hop thing. And she had come with this big success with Fugees that they were expecting her to give another, like, full track, like, drums and bass line, and maybe get Wyclef Jean on a verse or two. And then for her to kind of strip it down like that, people thought it was one of her dopest work. But because it was an acoustic and people were so used to more elements of it, it lost the commercial appeal to it. And, that's kind of how I feel with my music, too. Like, so many people are concerned about me wearing a dress or concerned about me, am I hip-hop or not? I'm like, do you like the track? Yes. Do you love the track? Like, absolutely. I woke up and that was the first thing I thought about because it was so catchy. It was stuck in I'm like, see, that's the point. All these other rappers, you can't say that about them because they're still wearing their ball cap and they're doing but it's contrived. Like, maybe that's them, sure. But it's just like, there isn't that artist or that musician that comes out anymore. It's like Elton John, when you see him, you're like, oh, that guy means business. I don't give a crap what the hell's going on. I know that's good. That's why I sent you like clips of Skylar Grey that play with Eminem. Because when she was like doing the piano bits, I'm like, what an amazing singer. So her cadence and her like vocal inflections and stuff, and did those like beautiful like elements to her. So I don't know all the technical terms, I apologize. But that was like, wow. Or when I saw like Jessie Smollett, who was on Empire, and he's singing with Alicia Keys, and it was perfect song about, race and Martin Luther King. And I'm like, and she's including me in the conversation, like saying a line in there, like every color was beautifully made, like every shade or something. And I was like, yes, that's what I need in my life. And I want to go to the mountaintop and scream it because, us being different races and maybe whatever we are spiritually and age shouldn't define the conversation, shouldn't define we should be first human beings, and our quality of character matter, and our thoughts and feelings matter, and not be like, okay, that sucks because I'm angry with the world. Being like, no, I like it because it's beautiful, and even if it's not my cup of tea, I can respect it because it comes from a pure place. And that's what gets me more, and I see, and then I hear Jessie Smollett getting fired off of his court case, which is real or fake. I don't get into it like that because it's none of my business. But I'm like, so he was singing so beautifully, and he did this amazing job, and just sort of like one issue, you're going to let him go with like no squinch or no remorse or no shedding a tear like that, and I was just taken back by that. And, respect to real artists. I really want to make sure that on this platform you respect not just your family but who made you, your mentors. Like, that's why I started off by giving props to Polo, because, he could have not put me on here. He could have just said, the hell with him. I'll just take his money. I'll be respectful. I'll do his song and forget. And that's your personal preference. But I really appreciate it because I've been waiting so long to be put on and have my thoughts and feelings. I really think, it's just you. I think a lot of people would be inspired. Why is he wearing a dress? And get into the mind of why is he doing a spoken word? Because that's not what hip-hop does. I'm like, why not? Who cares if it does it? Like, if it's a dope poem, you can't come to a poetry slam, you can't hear that dopeness, and you can't be it. So why not put it on a beat and So that's how my mind kind of works. And I feel, it's beautiful that when I go into nature, that's why I love nature as well, because everything makes sense. You look at a lion and you say, oh, it's a brutal killing machine. Or why did that, snake have to bite me? But it doesn't think like that. The nature goes, everything is a yin and yang. It's a balance. The snake is the size it needs to be because it has its perfect place in the animal kingdom. Same as an elephant does and same as a lion. And that's how we are. We didn't ask to get born. I didn't get asked to get born like a white Caucasian male to piss off society because people are hating white people right now. You didn't get asked to get born a black to make your life tougher because people are racist. So we have to put that aside and not ignore it or forget it, but being like, okay, let's just draw a line in the sand and say, okay, forget all that. We're both human beings. We've both been to a McDonald's. We've both, spit on the mic. And so now let's go in the positive realm or direction and see now what's the next step of human evolution. And that's, a lot of people like Lenny Kravitz and Stevie Wonder and, even Paul McCartney, as we were talking about earlier and off camera, it's like they did that song Ebony and Ivory, which is super controversial. It's like a white guy singing with a black guy, and it was a beautiful song, and it wasn't everyone's cup of tea, but it's like, that's so juvenile. That's so, nursery rhyming. Like, it's just so, I don't get it. But, because when I look at music, I don't look at it like a saxophone and a guitar all the time. I look at it as a sound wave or like a bunch of chords and patterns. And I look at it as more like my creative expression at the time, right? I don't look at it like, oh, people back in the day were harping on me. It's like, you can't put this on a record because hip-hop doesn't do whatever. And you can't put this on a rock record because we don't put saxophones on. I'm like, but does it make the song sound better? Does it fit the groove or whatever I'm doing? Yeah. Well, then what's the problem? That's how it was back in the day. They're like, you're good, but you can't do it because you're black. And I was like, how annoying that must have been to live in a life where you're just as good as me or even better, and you can't do it because people are narrow-minded. That's the same thing you did with me in rap, right? They saw Eminem and they saw Vanilla Ice, but I wasn't at the level, so they were like complete racist to me and completely, oh, you can't rap, and what does a white guy know that a black does, and you're a wigger, and I'm like, dude, I think it's a skill set like anything else, like breakdancing, like graffitiing, like why? Am I gonna hold the aerosol can differently? Is my stroke gonna be different if I practice my technique at the same level of proficiency? Like that's, it's too petty to me. No, I just want to leave it off, to love yourself and love the people you're with, because, be blessed.
Word. So yeah, just to end your interview off, basically to ask you the same question is like, what are some words you would use to describe your music?
Oh, I would positivity, philosophical, a romantic sensibility, and I would definitely say unique and creative. And what's the word? Ingenuitive or, kind of ingenuity, but like in that form. Innovative. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Because I don't think personally, no offense to anyone, I haven't heard anyone do a 5/4 rap in my life or on a song. So, or do like a verse that's like single syllable alliteration. So that's the kind of, I would say that my stuff is very unique and creative in that sense. Yes.
Word.
So you said we're gonna get into the some freestyling right now.
Yeah, man. That was a good podcast. Definitely a lot to unpack from that. But yeah, we're just gonna get into the freestyle. So yeah, I'm just gonna play the beat. This is a beat that I made.
So how do you want to touch the mic? You have to give me some kind of thing.
Yeah, just rap basically, and like when you're ready, just look at me. Just try not to leave the beat empty for too long, right? We're usually trying to go off the rhyme scheme from the last person. Like, you've been to like Cypher Club.
Yep.
Right? So kind of the same idea, right?
So I'll just basically point to you when I'm ready, and then you'll point to me, and then we'll kind of do it like that, or we'll just feel it how we go.
Yeah.
So I'll let you start off since you're the host of this, and pass it off to me.
Stop me.
Yeah.
Don't stop ever
go by Polo Sho with Rudolf the Third. This is the Get Into the Bag podcast freestyle. Just gonna get into it. Yeah. Yo. Was on my way to the studio when I crashed my car. But I'm glad to be alive. I know I'm destined to be a shooting star. I'ma take it far, even with no vehicle. People playing this track saying, dog, that dude is really cool. Yo, dropped out of university school just to make it my own. Yo, I'm trying to climb and stay on the throne. Yo, in the city I'm trying to be known. All these other cats doing the same thing, it's like they trying to be clones. I don't understand them, it's like they playing a game and they ain't trying to win, they just trying to play the same, man. Look, I'm doing what I can to be the man. Spit the bars through the XLR. Yo, I know you feel it, dog. Look, every time I'm on the mic it's different. I wanna listen, I wanna tell the cats, don't just listen. Taking every word I'm saying, eat it and digest it. Make it a part of the way that you're living. Hey yo, and chill with it in your system, just like a beatboxer does when he plays his fuck. Yo, pass it.
So here we go, it's my chance for you to give you some advance. For me to lower lands, to hit you with the glass glare, to not slip and fall, to call out any MC for whack. Matter of fact, what I'm thankful to be on this track is that because I'm giving you positivity, real energy, my straight wizardry, electricity to shock your mind, to shock your soul until you lose control. Lyrical prism, if you're not careful you'll lose and slip into this ism. Matter of fact, you'll start to spasm and convulse lyrically cause your mind has been blown. When I come through, I'm in the zone. Matter of fact, you might think and pick up your cell phone and call 911 cause it's barely begun. I put the G down and started with the F cause I'm just having fun. And I've just barely begun to start a riot. No, to come through and say polite it. When I write it, it's nice and clear and precise. Cause when I flow, I'm just that smooth, cool and nice. Polo, go,
yo, that was a nice smooth flow, yo. Yo, trying to take it out this world, yo. I'm trying to find a pretty girl, yo. So I can hold her hand, walk to the park. Hopefully it's not too late and not too dark. Hey yo, I wanna just be up in the studio doing what I do best, making flows that hit the beat and digress. Hey yo, so much on my mind, need to get it off my chest. Yo, so much on my mind, I rhyme and I digress. Yo, I feel blessed cause every day's a new day to keep on chasing this dream I've had since day one. I'm having fun just talking about my truth. Yo, I'm having fun and I'm not even in the booth. Yo, look, I am the truth, the one and only. Every time I'm in the studio, I'm with a homie. Yeah, me and Rudolf just met, but we kicking it off. And yo, we known to freestyle and just kick shit off. You know how it is, it's like a kung fu class. You don't have to ask, we the ones that kick ass. We the ones that go past any other cast that think they got a chance to go past us. Yo, you need to stop playing. This is not Mario Kart, it's not a game. Look, all we do is what we can. All we do is stay fly. All we do is look, all we do is train like we martial artists from Japan. Yo, I got a plan and that's to make it to the tippity top. Until then, I ain't gonna stop. Look, and trust me, I'm hip hop. I ain't never going pop. I'ma keep doing this hot until the day that I pop. Everyone's saying, yo, Polo, when the album gonna drop? I'ma tell you when, next time it's coming. But you gotta make sure that you're listening. I mean, have your eardrums in. Yo, you already know how I'm coming. The number one in the game, that's what I'm becoming, yo.
Here I go as slow as I can flow. Cause when I flow, it's H2O, hydro. Matter of fact, I flow like a stream, I flow like a river. Cause I make you quiver as the water falls down to the stream. Really tell me, are you living the dream or you just living a scheme? Matter of fact, are you doing the wrong? Digging the song that's really not true to you. Doing the 1-2, kinda like a scratch do. But I don't care, sampling Houdini. You think you're cool, but you're a buffoon obviously. Cause you get caught up in the mess. Poverty, you get caught up in the mess. Media, see, I don't care what the narrative is. If you're not keeping it real, what the heck do you feel? Telling on the microphone, cause what I say is the truth. Otherwise, what am I recording in the booth?
In the booth, I make a whack MC vanish, poof. My flow is the proof, yo, I am the truth. Said that before, I'm just gonna keep on giving you more of the flows, yo.
Cause here I go again with another flow, delicious, nutritious. ABC 1, 2, 3, I give you all the vitamins from A to Z, kinda like Centrum Silver. When I come through, there is no other who is better. Kung Fu grip, I come through and never trip or fall, cause I got my lyrical balance. You can even see cause you ain't got the talent, you ain't got the skill. Man, where is the deal? You're like parsley when I'm like rosemary. You don't understand cause you think you a sage. Matter of fact, you're smoking that funky oregano. Listen to me, baby. You think you're cool, no you're high and crazy. Psychedelic flow, kinda like lazy. Yo, you need to listen to Polo, but first Rudolf the Third. Haven't you heard? I ain't absurd. No, I ain't a turd, a piece of crap. Cause when I come through with this rap, oh no, it's not another booby trap. It's lyrical mind explosion. Polo, it's your turn, so here you go.
Yeah, it's my turn, so I'ma spin around. Just like a DJ when he's got his hand on the record player. He's scratching on the 1s and 2s. It's nothing new. Look, I know what I'm becoming and that's the truth. I got dreams to plot, I know I have a destiny. So I'm trying to make $1 million before I turn 33. You feeling me? I've been a G. Yo, I wanna keep on doing what I can, being the man in my land. I want people to call me up and say, yo, Sho, when's the next show? Trying to perform, I'm trying to come to and see you do what you do. You know your style is far from norm. And yo, I knew from very young what I would become, and that was the greatest one. Hey yo, you feel me? Yo, I'm hotter than the sun. Word of my homie, Rudolf the Third. We all came from the sun. Told my pops, I'ma be his son, the one that's gonna put it on for the city. That's the YYC. Spitting his hot flows to make it on the MP3s. Cats is streaming it and saying, yo, this shit is heat. Yeah, that's how it is. Yeah,
There you go, and there you have it. Polo and Rudolf the Third, and that's the show.
Yeah. Nice. That was really cool rhymes from you, man.
Oh, thanks. I tried my best.
Yeah. So yeah, that was Just Kicking It. Oh, fuck, man, that was the name of the old podcast. My bad. That was Getting to the Bag podcast, episode 7 with Rudolf the Third. Rudolf, do you want to plug yourself?
Yes, I want to say check out www.cdbaby.com/CD/Rudolf the Third with an F, not a PH. And also make sure to write into the comments below your thoughts and opinions on this podcast. And if you ever want me to come on another episode and kind of maybe we'll answer some fan questions. So we'll read it and we'll be like, oh, okay, so might be different if you want me back on a second episode. And any techniques you want to tell us about our freestyling, because we can always improve, right?
Of course.
I know you were struggling on some bars, no offense, and I kind of felt like, I had to bring it. And so, yeah, any constructive criticism. Remember, no haters. And I also want to plug whatever this is going to be. Hopefully it's going to be the link somewhere for you to find it out. And it's going to be on my Facebook page, which is just RUDI, Rudy, space DECSEY, Rudy Dayche. That's my real name. on Facebook. So check that out. I'll put the link to the podcast on there for you to check out. And yeah, I'm going to have probably one day a YouTube channel, and that's about it for today. So yeah, positive comments, no hate, and support the love of the music.
Yeah. Guys, make sure to follow Rudolf on social media. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe, leave a thoughtful comment. Again, I go by Polo Sho. I'm a rapper / entrepreneur. Please follow YYC Hip Hop Daily and Solace Studios, which is where this was filmed / recorded. You can find my music at Polo Sho on all streaming platforms, and you can find me on social media at Polo Sho YYC. Thank you guys again for tuning in to Get Into the Bag podcast, episode 7. Peace.